can be a depressing place. Even if, like me, you are privileged enough to have a pretty awesome life most of the time, you can still very easily fall into a funk when you contemplate how shitty the world is in so many ways and the suffering that is experienced by far too many people. I was asked a question recently on my You Had to Ask series by someone who was sort of living with depression, not just depression just in general, but also depression resulting from the sorry state of things in the world. One of the things I said to try and cheer this person up is that in the long run, things are moving in the right direction. And I just want to expand on that message for this video because I think it's a very important message that those of us who care about social justice, who care about progress, need to hear, because on the day-to-day, things can seem really depressing a lot of the times, especially when there are setbacks. For instance, just recently, an LGBT equality bill, an equality ordinance was voted down in the city of Houston that would have guaranteed that trans folk were considered a legally protected category. And that bill was defeated by popular vote thanks to the same sort of fear-mongering smear campaign that is usually launched against such bills that would extend civil rights protections explicitly to trans folk by saying, oh, they're going to use your bathrooms. You know, that sort of really infantile fear-mongering that seems to work, unfortunately, a lot of the time. And in the wake of such a news story, it's very easy to just fall into a funk and go, oh, Christ, what are we doing? You know, like, what is happening to this country? I fall into these sorts of moods very often in the wake of gun violence. I've said in videos before that I consider America's gun problem and America's total apathy toward trying to do anything about the gun problem to be the most damning thing about this country at the moment. And whenever there's another mass shooting or some other high-profile incident that brings the gun problem to the forefront of the conversation, only for it to pass away after a day or two with no real action being taken, it's really easy for me to just start to feel hopeless, to start to feel like this is such a huge problem. This is never going to be fixed. This is going to cost so many more people their lives. This speaks to the worst part of our country and our culture, and we're just not interested in fixing it. It's so easy for me to fall into that mood. And it helps to bring me out of it, to say to myself that there is such a thing as a right side of history, and that history moves in the direction of progress. Things do tend to move forward in the long term. In answering that question, I paraphrased Martin Luther King Jr. I said, the arc of history bends toward progress. That was a paraphrase of a famous line from King, who said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And that line from King was itself a paraphrasing of an earlier line from Theodore Parker, who was a 19th century American minister and abolitionist and advocate for women's rights and the rights of the poor, and just generally a social reformer and all-around awesome guy. He said, I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and contemplate the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. And as long as I'm quoting Parker, here's another awesome line of his. This one is about women's rights. He says, to make one half of the human race consume its energies in the functions of housekeeper, wife, and mother is a monstrous waste of the most precious material God ever made. As an atheist, I would part company with the last few words of that line, but with the overall sentiment, I am in complete enthusiastic agreement, and I think that the arc of history has vindicated Parker's thoughts there, has shown that what he said he was able to see through his conscience was accurate. The institution of slavery in the United States was abolished. The women's suffrage movement, which kicked into high gear later in the 19th century, was eventually successful in securing the right to vote for women in the United States. And then feminism in general continued to be an immensely positive and transformative social movement in the United States that made this country better in ways that are difficult to enumerate. And the same thing with the Black Civil Rights Movement and the LGBT rights movement. These are incredibly positive, transformative civil rights movements that continue to push our country, our society, indeed our world in general, humanity as a whole, toward progress, toward openness, toward acceptance, toward equality. The arc of the moral universe does, in fact, bend toward justice. And justice is such an important word there. When King said it, he said it so much more succinctly and eloquently than I attempted to in my poor paraphrase of him when I said it bends toward progress. The arc is long and it bends toward justice, and justice is such an important concept in these attempts to advocate for equality, to advocate for the rights of the marginalized. We do these things, we believe in these things because they are just, because we feel that to leave someone behind is unjust. For someone to be left behind, to be denied an opportunity because they are poor, or because of the color of their skin, or because of their national origin, or because they're a woman, or because of their gender identity, or their sexual orientation, that these things are unjust. And they harm not only those individuals and those groups who are directly affected by these forms of oppression, but they harm all of us. We humans are social animals. We are strong when all of us are given the opportunity to be strong and to stand and to reach our full potential. We stand strongest when we stand together. And yes, it is very easy to become discouraged and demoralized at a setback like the failure of the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, or to cite a much less socially significant example, but one that nonetheless is on my mind a lot because of the circles I move in and what I do for a living, the ugly and regressive and ignorant streak of anti-feminism in the YouTube atheist community, which is something that is a continual source of dismay and embarrassment to me. When contemplating these sorts of things, it's very easy to get discouraged. It's very easy to throw your hands up and say, "Fuck this! I'll never make a difference here. There's nothing to be done here. This is just shit, and it's always going to be shit, and that's the way it is." The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. The Houston Equal Rights Ordinance may have failed, but in the long run, the movement for equality and justice for LGBT people is going to win, is winning right now. Who would have thought a few years ago that by now same-sex marriage would be legal coast to coast all over the United States? Who would have thought that that would happen? Who would have thought a few years ago that don't ask, don't tell in the military would have been abolished? A lot of us were complaining about how long it was taking. And I don't think we were doing that wrongly. I think it was completely legitimate that we were complaining about how long it was taking, because it was long overdue when it happened. But all of a sudden, there it was. It happened. All of a sudden, same-sex marriage is legal. It just happened. And as for my other example of the rampant misogyny in the YouTube atheist community, which I acknowledge is not of great importance to people who are outside of that community, but it's important to remember that those people outside of that bubble, outside of that small, limited community of people on YouTube, have already lost. They lost years ago. They are swimming against an overwhelmingly powerful, onrushing tide of history and progress. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why they are so petulant and angry and vindictive, because they have already been left behind by society at large, because the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends toward justice. And it's not just happy philosophy. It's not just a feel-good thing to say. It's not just a motivational poster to put up on your wall. It is borne out by history. That is the way it works. We are an incredibly adaptive social species. And we have shown ourselves through the long course of history, not always day to day, but through the long course of history, we have shown ourselves capable of committing to and accomplishing amazing social reforms, and committing to and accomplishing incredible social progress. And it's not over. There's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of work to do. But it is virtually a certainty, judging by history, that it will be accomplished. And on a day-to-day basis, it's just a matter of hanging in there. And when you're privileged like I am to have a pretty good life day-to-day, when you are fortunate enough to not really suffer on a personal level from the sorts of problems that you would like to see eradicated, even though it's easy to get discouraged when there are setbacks to the larger cause, when you think about that big picture virtual guarantee of success in the long term, it also becomes just as easy to throw those negative feelings away and to feel not discouraged, but to feel motivated and to feel empowered and to feel eager to want to bring that inevitable future to reality as soon as possible. Hey folks, thanks for checking out the Ramble. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and share this video. Subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this by becoming a supporter of this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks a lot. See you next time.